Paper? It takes some notes. Some paper, take some notes. All I want to do outside of most taking notes, but I can sleep past that. I can sleep to 5. In the afternoon? Dan the man was born out. So you were what? Still, you can be worn out even when you're 6 years old. Same stupid game. Come Drake. Literally the best game ever. You have it? Why Is Jimmy coming over here? Yes. Text him. That's what you Just call him. Be like, hey, Jimmy. No, it's like, yeah, dude. I got it. Even though it's Saturday, I gotta have a football game today. Even though football season ended like 3 months ago. I'm gonna try flipping this big time. Call him, Sam. Yeah, give me his phone number. Then I'm gonna call him. Huh? Alright. You think I'm joking? I do too. Shut up, damn. So it's added contact. Create contact. Jim There you go. Look at his name. No, Daniel. Alright, let's go do this answers. I'm like, hi. Dang it. He doesn't. And that's my Sam's piano tool. Daniel, I swear if you don't shut up. Daniel, just shoot. Did you finish your B-roll film yesterday? Did you hear my background music? I had the Star Wars Cantina song. Mine? Yeah, dude. It's all B-roll. Mine makes no sense at all. No. I have mine about 3 seconds. Well, no, they had to be about 3 seconds. First time playing me? Childhood isolation. Did you hear that? No, did you hear my thing? Damn, did you hear my thing the other day? Where I was like, I was playing Connor, and he's like, Dad,
No, I don't.
I'm like,
Yeah, Connor kept screaming like,
it's so funny. He's like, because he thinks his dad's still there, but it's like, how did you not hear that? It was right beside you. Here, I'll play it for you on Monday. Let's go tomorrow. Pierce is gonna be at DCS tomorrow. Let's go. Yeah. He's coming. Miss Sam's gonna be there. I
You watch this one.
Y'all know what you're talking about?
watch it, be like, hey, we're just gonna play one big confused. Yeah, dude.
Like 5. Friday night. Hey, you also want to stay in here the whole time? Just like not go to any other ones? Let's just not go to the CCO either. Not doing that one. Well, I'm about to just not do the DBQ one. Let's go to the A-push one, dude. Right. No, let's just go to the GoPro one. Let's see how much we love GoPro. Oh, Sam, you didn't take GoPro, did you? Oh my gosh, GoPro is awful. Tests were hard. And go over after. Yep. What did you have on? See, you know. I remember watching awful.
Don't know anybody in here.
Oh, dang, somebody put up a 10 grade. What? Fine. No, she's not putting it into the next term. She said I did good on mine. She said I wouldn't have to do much extra. Something I at least got an 80.
All right, we're supposed to get started at 9:10, so I'm going to go ahead and get started, and if she interrupts me with an announcement, then we'll just kind of pause for her. I'm Allison Roberts. I'm from Dunbar High School. I've been teaching AP World for nearly 10 years, so I'm your kind of content specialist, so to speak. So you were here to get information about content and how to review it for the AP World History exam. So before we get started, I want to talk to you just about like what we're doing and like what I expect from you today. This isn't school.
Are you starting or?
Yeah, I'm just going to go ahead and start. And if I hear some announcement, then I'll pause. Yeah. So it's not school today, so if you need to go to the restroom or something, just feel free to just kind of walk quietly out there. Just don't cause a lot of disruption. Your cell phones, this is optional. So if you would like to be on your cell phone and like texting and doing all that kind of business, then just don't come. Just leave. You can go text somewhere else. Go to the mall, like McDonald's. It'll be fun. I don't know, someplace interesting. Right, I'm like, the mall, wait, that's in Lexington. What's fun to do here?
Nothing.
Okay, so maybe just stay in the room and, learn something. You already woke up. You might as well do something productive with your day today. If for any other reason, like you need to get a drink of water or whatever, just, like I said, just walking out, walking back in. No big deal. We're going to treat this sort of like a college class today. Okay, are you feeling excited about that? Or scared? Scared or excited? Okay. All right, so what we're going to talk about, here's my kind of list of things. There's not really a bunch of space, and I don't want to erase anything on the board for Ms. Sunset. So what we're going to be talking about is kind of an inquiry into this really large question, which is, how do I study for this exam? There's a spot here, or you can sit back there. It doesn't matter. Just move my scarf off of that chair if you decide to. Yeah. So what is the exam like? That'll be the first part that we tackle. And I'm going to really just be focusing on the multiple choice questions because there are other sessions that focus on the essays. How are the questions written? So I'm going to give you we're going to analyze what the test is like so you know exactly what to study and how to study that. And how do I know what to study? Because for each of you, it's going to be something different. So you don't have to all study the same things. You don't have to get into a group and that kind of stuff.
Everything good?
So we're good. Thank you. So I'm going to give you two different plans. I'm going to give you like a plan if you start today, and I'm going to give you a plan if you decide to procrastinate until about the week before. So I'll give you both plans and figure out which one is for you. I'm not going to give you too much written material. I will give you a packet today, an example of some kind of content review that another teacher has written that has done some really good work on the internet for you, and you might have seen it already. Have you all heard of Freemanpedia? Mm-hmm. Good. Yeah. So I talked to Ms. Linda a couple years ago, and she started using that, I think. So we're going to start with our kind of test difficulty. So I'm not your teacher. So I'm not going to try to like sell you on this is a fun AP class and everything's going to be great and don't worry, the exam, you can do it. Okay, this is the hardest AP exam and you're sophomores, right? Okay, so your test next year is not as hard as your test this year. So I'm not going to sugarcoat that for you. So it's really important that you understand what kind of level of commitment it's going to take for you to get a passing score because it's really difficult to pass this test. Like the pass rate, they've kind of moved where who's allowed to pass and who isn't. You're competing with other people to pass. You're not competing with the test. You can get a 50% on the multiple choice test and like blow the essays out of the water and still pass. You could do the opposite. You still have to do something on those essays. So there's a lot of strategy that goes into this test. This is a marathon. It's the only test left, the only AP test left that does 3 full essays and a full set of multiple choice questions. So it's, quite a bit to tackle. So that means that you have to prepare for this. And I don't know, are there any people in this room who have done some sort of really long task, like, or any athletes? And athletes. Okay, so if you are not an athlete, or if you have kind of seen a goal for yourself prepared. Like for an athlete, it might be like at the end of the season, you want to do this. Or for a track runner, it's like, okay, I want to be able to run my 800 meter in this many minutes. So you have to sort of backward plan. How am I going to get to that place? If I'm going to run a marathon, how do I get there? So you start with just running a mile, and then you run 2 miles, and then you run 3 miles. And every weekend you build your runs to a little longer until you get to a place where you can run a marathon. That's what you have to do for this test. And that's kind of what you've been preparing for each day. Whenever you're in class, you're preparing for all of the skills that you need to be able to, use in order to tackle that at the end of the semester. So there are varying types of people in this room. You know who you are. You're about to hear these things. Like some of you guys are what I would call the try-hards. I'm going to try really hard. And I don't really believe inside of me that I'm like super smart, but I know that I try hard enough that I'm going to make up for all of that stuff. Okay, that person. Or the Renaissance person. Like you're kind of good at everything, not like shining star one thing. Or kind of the person who feels like they are intellectually superior. Things have come easy for you. No matter what type of person that you are, you're going to have to approach studying this in a different way, because no matter what, you're going to come across something that's going to be difficult for you. You're going to either come across some period of time that's difficult for you, a type of essay that's difficult for you, a type of question, and nobody's perfect. So whenever you all are rallying around each other to kind of tackle this stuff and study, you have to take into consideration, which persons that you're studying with. And you're going to have to sort of build each other up, because some people are going to lack more confidence than others. Because like I said, this is a pretty big task. Okay, so what I'm going to start with is what is the exam like? And I'm going to focus on the multiple choice questions, because like I said, the essays are in other sections. And I'm going to use one site and one kind of thing like one site that's got tons and tons of links to it that's going to really help you. Okay, so all I did was, back up here, I went to Google and I just wrote in AP World Exam periods, because you know that they separate them into periods of time. And the very first thing that, the third thing, that comes up is on AP Central, the AP World History Exam. Hopefully you guys have seen this website, because you kind of frequented it before. And so what it does is, and should not be any surprise for you, but I'm just going to remind you, it tells you what the format of the assessment is. So it tells you that there are 70 multiple choice questions you have 55 minutes for, and that's 50% of your exam score. And then there are 3 questions for a free response, 130 minutes, and that's 50% of your exam score. Now, like I said, I'm going to focus on the multiple choice questions, but I do want to kind of direct your attention to this website where it says, where it kind of gives you all of the sample sample essay questions that you've seen, so all of the released exam essays here, and they'll talk about that in the other sessions. It'll even give you sample responses that students have written. Are you all familiar with this at all? No? Okay, so you can open up, the free response questions from last year, and you can guarantee yourself that those are not going to be the free response questions for this year. So you can at least eliminate some things that you need to study for essays and such. But as far as the multiple choice questions go, they really don't do as much for you for that. So we're going to go here, which it says multiple choice questions. For sample multiple choice questions, refer to the course and exam description, and we're just going to click right there. And you can very easily type in AP World History course description, same exact thing. All right, and so if we kind of flow through this PDF document, it gives you a bunch of descriptions over what what the exam is like. So I'm going to just pause here for a moment. So there are those 4 historical thinking skills. So they test your historical thinking skills with multiple choice questions, and I'll show you some examples for that in just a moment. Course themes. These are just the SPICE or sprite charts that you've done before. That's just what this is broken down to, like interaction, culture, state building, expansion, that's politics, or economic systems. So there's the E part. And then, of course, you already know this, the periods. So you guys are probably somewhere around this section here, correct, in class. All right, so when you look at this long PDF document, you can scroll through this on your phone. It's really easy to just kind of send yourself this, or even not send yourself to, go through these links here. Sorry, just going to keep scrolling. Sorry, I'm trying not to go too fast, but This beautiful laptop action. Okay, so the first thing that you're going to see here that's kind of importance is these world regions. And it kind of tells you which world region. They're going to use this terminology on the exam often. So if you're looking to memorize something, one of the first things that you're going to need to memorize is which stuff happens in which region. Okay, so whenever they say compare, this happens most of the time on essay questions, like compare West Africa to East Asia from 1450 to 1750. Well, that's a multiple choice question. You're going to need to know, okay, wait, where, what? Like your West Africa, okay, California, West, got the West part. And then if you say, okay, East Asia, what countries is that? Like, is that China? Is that India? What in the world? So this map right here, so again, this is in this document that we're talking about, is of some importance whenever you're talking about references in multiple choice questions. Now, if you want to know what percentage of each period to study, so this kind of links up to our later goal, like what do I study? Which portions do I need to focus on? The biggest thing for you to note is that everything that happens in period 1, which is the very first period you studied, that's only 5% of the multiple choice, section. So if you're going to decide to kind of pull out one section to not really focus on, that might be it. If you're starting to feel overwhelmed, you really want to see that, 15% for this period 2. So 3, 4, 5, and 6. So that's the stuff that you've been studying really since probably fall break. All of those things, that's where the majority of your exam is coming from, right? So you get 20% from each period. Again, this might not be unique to you. So whenever we start to look at sample or what information is in here, we're going to be looking at this. It's called the, again, curriculum framework. And it's a list of things that they give us as teachers of what we have to teach you. And so every single multiple choice question comes from this outline. So if you took this outline and you figured out a way to memorize it, you would blow the multiple choice section out of the water, essentially, right? So this is hard to memorize, right? Like you're like, what? Like I'm going to take an outline and memorize 50 pages of information. That's kind of ridiculous. So thankfully, we've seen a lot of people, and one particular teacher with that Freemanpedia, take a lot of this information and put it into a visual kind of piece. So that's where I'm going to kind of start. I'm going to pass out that visual to you. You might already have it. So if you already have one of those, if you already have this printed off for you, you're more than welcome to just pass this little document right along to the next group of people. We don't have to use it. Okay, so this is just a reminder. So we want to put what's it called? Key concept 1.2. That's the side that you want to face up. So it looks like this. This is the side that you want to look at. So again, you're going to look at it right now, so it's in front of you. But if you don't want to take this and you want to just leave it here, I can do that. And I'm going to put this on the screen also. All right, and then while I'm getting this on the screen, I'm just going So at this point, we've got the side up that has the map on the top, and it says Key Concept 1.1, Big Geography and the People of the Earth. And this is information that is very old, right? So stuff that you haven't studied for a really long time. So whenever the people go through the College Board, they write these multiple choice questions. They make sure and they vet them through the document that I've just showed you, the really long outline document. And they make sure that they have given you questions that your teachers were at some point supposed to teach you. So we've been asking for a document like this for years, like, please tell us the stuff that you want us to teach these kids. You don't tell us the answers to questions, but like, you know, we don't want to go off on a tangent on like one particular event if that's not something that you need them to know. And so they came up with this document that I showed you, and then this beautiful man put together like some nice visuals for you guys here on these little key content posters, key concept posters, I should say. And then the College Board gave us this course directory. It's for us to see how did they write multiple choice questions so that we can kind of mentally prepare students for what exactly to expect. So it used to be a type of test where you could memorize all the information and you would get a 5, but that's not how it is anymore because it's really focused on trying to figure out can you apply the skill that you have as a historical thinker to multiple choice questions. So I'm going to show you what those look like here. So a sample question is this: which of the following was the major effects of the Neolithic Revolution? Okay, so the choices are the establishment of sedentary village communities, the spread of a migratory way of life, a decline in total population, an increase in the use of bronze tools. Okay, so all of this is to say, and this is the kind of answer key here, it doesn't tell us what letter it is, but it's testing your ability to see causation. It's testing your ability to see what interaction is like between humans during this period. And it's also testing your content knowledge of key concept 1.2.I.A. Okay, so if you go back to that outline that I showed you at the beginning, it would have the answer there. The answers are also here because this beautiful Freeman person put together those exact things, just not with all the points here on this. So we're looking for the answer on this poster. Do you see it? So it says 1.2, right? So you got to flip your page to 1.2. This is the part whenever you start studying with other people or you have a full class. People are like, I don't really want to say what I think it is because I'm afraid I'm going to be incorrect. Okay, so this is key concept 1.2. And again, if we go here, it says 1.2.I.A. So 1.2, if we scroll down a little further, .I.A. Okay, so it says, possibly as a response to climate change, permanent agricultural villages emerged first in the lands of the eastern Mediterranean. Agriculture emerged at different times in all these different river valleys, right? Okay, so this is what the College Board says where the answer key would be, right? And if you're looking here, it doesn't have that exact wording, right? So the question is, are these better to study or is this better to study? So it really just depends on the time frame, like how long you've got to study. If you decide you're going to take the long approach, like the 6 to 8 week approach, then you're going to want to use this, right? Because you want to get used to this type of wording. If you decide to use that 1 week approach, you got 1 week, you got to do what you got to do, then this is probably a better decision, right? And even if you use that long approach, you do want to use these to help you review whenever it comes to just like a week left. Okay, so if we know what that's 1.2.I.A. Okay, so which of the following was a major effect of the prolific revolution. All of us should be able to easily answer that the answer is A. Now, if you don't know what sedentary means, then it's like, oh, no, that's separate problems about vocab that I don't even know, right? Sedentary. So they use that verbiage in that outline. So sedentary meaning kind of settled village community, so people stop roaming around and they just settle in one place. Okay, so that's a causation type of question. And causation types of questions are generally easy to memorize, right? This is, if you memorize that information, you would get that question right. But that's not all the types of questions that we've got. So sometimes we ask comparison questions. We are asked comparison questions. So I'm going to direct your attention to, we'll do another causation question, number 2, real fast, and then we'll move on to number 3. Okay, so it says, which of the following occurred as a result of the development of agriculture in societies that previously relied on hunting and gathering? So we're trying to figure out which one of these things happened. Is it the conditions for women improved? And at that point, everyone should like laugh. That just never, that's never an answer, sadly. Okay, the incidence of disease declined, population density increased, degradation of the environment lessened. Okay, so if you just use your common sense, you can kind of pull out a few things, right? Because you're like, okay, when people started farming, degrading environment lessened. No, because people are messing with the earth more, right? Okay, so that's not true. So it kind of leads you into the incidence of disease decline. So you got more people in one area. No, disease isn't going to decline, right? People are going to just increase in disease because they're just going to start, making families and being all together and whatnot. So that kind of leaves us to see the population density increase. Now we go back to this curriculum framework, and it tells us the answer keys in 1.2.2.A. So let's go back to there, 1.2.2.A. And it says, pastoralism and agriculture led to more reliable and abundant food supplies, which increased the population. So are you all seeing like, oh my gosh, there's an answer key, right? There's an answer key. It's like, and they give it to you. It's online. Like you can print it off. It's on your phone. It's everywhere you need it to be. It's even in here, right? So it's even on these beautiful little pieces of poster paper. So how are you going to go about dealing with that, right? And so there's a lot of different ways you can go about dealing with what you need to memorize, because you're still like, part of this is kind of, if you're into the memory game, is that you can still do this. So the question is, how do you study? Everybody's going to study differently. When you come up with this document, or if you look at this poster, you need to look at stuff and you need to be highlighting or underlining the things that you don't know. Because the stuff that you do know, you don't want to waste a bunch of time on, right? Because you don't have all of the time in the world. It's slowly getting, smaller and smaller. So you really just want to look at what you don't know. All right, so what we're going to do now is you're going to look at this one, 2.2.4, so 2.2. All right, so move your poster. Your poster at 2.2. See it? This is what it looks like. So if your copier at the toner started getting a little rough, this is what we're looking for. All right, so this poster right here. All right, so I want you to review the poster for a moment. I want you to look at it. I want you to either underline, highlight, put little stars on the stuff that you're like, I don't remember that. Not at all. So take a minute, look through the poster. I feel like you have gone through it enough. You can just look up somehow. I can move on. Let's give you about 30 more seconds to the next. All right, so moving on to this question here, number 3. So this is question number 3. It's a comparison question. Which of the following was an important reason for the fall of the Roman, Han, and Gupta empires? So we have A, a long period of drought that destroyed crops and livestock. B, the use of slaves in their armies. C, intensified invasions and security issues along their frontiers. Or D, the refusal to tolerate Christianity. Okay, so at this point, look down at your poster paper, and you'll see a really big portion that says collapse on the right-hand side. Okay. So, do you see the answer on your paper? Yeah, you're right. Yeah, here you go next. Okay. The right answer is C. Yeah. So you'll notice that sometimes the wording that we see in these documents doesn't match this, but it's still the same information, right? Okay. So sometimes it does. Intensified invasions and security issues. If we look at the curriculum, the framework in the format of the outline that I was talking to you about, that leads us down to why did it happen, right? So that's down here. All of these 2 points. Okay, so you'll notice it says here. Environmental damage was one reason, and external problems along frontiers was another issue. Okay, so I want to direct your attention to this portion really fast so you can see the difference between this and this poster. So what they tell us as teachers to do is they want us to teach kind of these themes sometimes, like why did all of these things collapse? There's really not going to be a question over why did this particular place collapse, because they want you to be able to see overall during the classical period, why did groups kind of see a decline? Why did all these empires see a decline around the same time? And so you'll notice that over here it tells us, this is for teachers, but I'm giving you the teacher document, right? Teach one illustrative example of external problems along frontiers. So you only have to know about one of these, right? And so what you'll notice about this document, where it says just one, it actually lists all of them. But if you notice, like you're looking at one of them and you're like, I literally have no idea what this group of people is. It's because we only have to teach you one. Because the only time that you're going to see it on the multiple choice exam is you're going to see it as like a group of things. So it's going to say, just like it was worded there, how did the I'm trying to look back at that question. It grouped them into a group. How did the Roman, Han, and Gupta empires, why did they fall as a whole, right? Okay. Now, this could also appear as a essay question. I don't know if those essay people handle this a little bit more, but there could be an essay question that says, compare the reasons why these two empires fell, right? And the idea is that you've at least learned about one of them and you could expand on them. So the more that you know, the better off that you are whenever it comes to the essay section. But when it comes to the multiple choice section, you really just need to know these overarching themes in a lot of ways. Now I'm going to show you that this question appears every time, and you all are going to laugh when you think of it to yourself. Oh my gosh, this is so right. This question will appear on your exam too. There's always a question about why did empires fall, because it's that important, right? So this is our 2011 release exam, number 4. Which of the following contributed significantly to the fall of both Western Roman and Han empires? See the same answer? So it's still D, right? Just worded differently. So all of these questions, you can only come up with so many ways to ask these questions. And you can only come up with so many ways to do this multiple choice, to test it in multiple choice fashion. So you have all the tools that you need to memorize this stuff. The issue, whenever I started this whole session with, and this is the hardest task that you will ever, take on. The reason why it's so difficult is because it's literally from the beginning of population till now. So that's an extensive amount of material to cover, right? And the part is not the memorizing all the material. That part's not as hard as it is mentally that day. The test is so long. And so by the time you get to the second essay, you're like, what is life right now? What is this? This is horrible. I'm brain dead. When you finish the test, you'll be like, I don't know what happened. That's how crazy this just was, right? So we have to get you into a place where you're used to this type of, challenge. Just like whenever you finish running a race, you don't want to be the person who finishes the marathon and can't walk for 4 days because you didn't prepare, right? You want to be the person who finishes and you're like, I'm going to need to take a break and rest for a few days, but I can still walk, right? Everything's still okay. So that's where we're at. Now, when we go on to our next portion, we're going to do the similar type of thing for another section. We're just going to keep looking at different types of questions. Okay, so far I've shown you the kind of easy types of questions, those comparison and that kind of stuff. Now, when we get to some harder questions, those are skills. Hello, whatever happened here. Those are the types of things that test your skill. Okay, so here's a type of multiple choice question, and your teacher might have used this on an exam before. The reading types of questions. Okay, so those are the kinds that if you're a good test taker, this should excite you. You're like, oh, I don't need to know. I don't need to use my memory. I can just get the information from what's on the test. And that does happen for a good portion of the multiple choice questions. Those aren't the ones that are the scary ones, though, right? Those are not the ones that you come across and you're like, I don't even know, right? This is more like the ACT. So you've got 2 reading passages. This is a favorite thing for this college board to do. And it asks you, how does the second passage not support the first passage? So how are these different, essentially, right? And so then you've got some choices, and the key concepts are still covered. They ask you questions or they give you sections that are about content that you should know, but it's really testing your skills, your writing skills. So this is if you were writing a paper, you had your thesis, tell me about the counter argument, right? And so these are really long. So you need to memorize enough stuff that you collapse enough time that when you get to these questions, you can just kind of okay, I'm going to read these carefully and choose wisely, because you can't memorize this stuff, right? So that's the strategic part of this multiple choice section. So I want to give you a moment to read this so you can kind of see what we're looking for. And I'm going to scroll down a bit so you can see the whole thing. So take a moment. Now pause. So everybody look down for a second. And I'm going to tell you how much time, in the general, go ahead.
Can you zoom in a little bit on?
Can I zoom in? I can. Hold on. Zoom. Let me get a little zoom. Okay, hold on. Let me move this away. think that's actually the top of it anyway. All right, so what we're gonna do is, I'm gonna give you a little timer, right? So you know exactly what it is. If you break down all of these questions, you have 70 questions, you've got 55 minutes. That means you've got like less than a minute, right, for every single question. So I'm gonna go ahead and stopwatch you, and I'll tell you whenever the time is up for less than a minute. So I can explain to you how important it is that you memorize enough stuff that you give yourself more than that much time for this. Okay, here we go. Big. And stop. Okay, so have you read through the entire question? Okay, so you got to see how fast are you reading. Not all of you read at the same speed, right? And then, did you have enough time to really look, make a good choice, and then look back through up to the reading? The answer is maybe. Some of you guys are fast readers. So take your time now. Finish the question. Make a good selection. Okay, stop. So if I gave you the pause, gave you the directions, paused, that was about a minute. Okay, so you don't have a minute to spend on a question like this. And you're going to get tired after a while, right? So you're reading. So how do you prepare for questions like this? Well, just the same way that you prepare for the ACT. That's one option, is you read questions and you try to, test your knowledge. But a really easy way to prepare for questions like this, best thing ever for people who are in AP classes, just read. Just read books. Because as you're reading, your reading speed gets faster and faster, right? And you start to see words that you've never heard. So on your relaxing time, whenever you really want to just like listen to music, maybe just pick up a book that you want to read. And that's it. Like that's how you prepare. Does that make sense? Okay. So the answer to this question, do you all feel comfortable? Right? Okay, so D is the right answer. Okay. So when we go down to other types of questions, we've already looked at comparison and causation questions. You'll notice that there are the percentage of comparison or causation questions. There's about, for causation, 40% of the exam is causation questions. So those are the types of questions you can memorize. And 15% are comparison style questions. So that still leaves a large chunk of the types of questions where you look at something or read something and you have to respond. But it's enough so that you could pass the multiple choice section. So that's kind of exciting. Okay, so this is key concepts that you don't have on your poster paper. But this is certainly a map. So I want you to check out a map, and you'll notice that this is a separate set of skills, contextualization. Let's look at this multiple choice question. So on a question like this, you kind of have two options. So this kind of depends on what type of test taker you are and how much like skill you already have when you get to images like this. So when you look at these images, if you start to try to incorporate all the things that you know, you can start to use that information to X things out, right? So like they're pulling out Zhenghe here and Hellenistic and Mauryan empires. And you're like, okay, Hellenistic, what does that mean? And if you don't remember that it's, you're talking about the Mediterranean area, or Mauryan, you're talking about India, right? So you can kind of pull some things out. Now, if you just use your skill, you don't know anything, like if I'm just an outsider, I come into this, when I'm looking at a map, I'm seeing like a bunch of dots, which represent on the map cities, right? And so that can help me pick B, which is the right answer, right? So the growth of new cities. If you start to go through here, like trading networks and technological innovations, you start to look at this monsoon winds. This is supposed to be a distractor for those people who have memorized everything and they're constantly, oh, okay, no. Okay, monsoon winds, what time is that? Oh, that was a technological innovation. That has to be the right answer. This is a distractor for that. So this promotes like the type of person who looks at the test as a holistic kind of, with a holistic approach, right? Uses your strategies. Okay, so moving on to the last type of question. There's two types that I'm going to show you, and this is kind of separated, so I'll go with this. And they're both about this 1450 to 1750 kind of time frame. And one type of question, you're going to see very few of these. There are probably maybe 3 or 4 on the exam, so if you missed all of them, you would still be okay. But it's a type of question called periodization. You guys have known this before, like what belongs in which period. Okay, so this is question number 11. And it says, and you'll notice that it spans across 2 periods, the key concept itself. So it says, which of the following changes best justify the claim that the late 1400s mark the beginning of a new period in world history? So you're trying to figure out which one of these, if you have known timeline, is happening around that time. Okay. So periodization is really great for those of you who see history on a timeline in your head, right? And so this question is really talking about the late 1400s, so it's 1450 and after, and which one of these developments happened. So if you are looking at this and you pick an answer like new religious movements, then maybe you didn't remember that all those new religious movements happened really between, like in that period too, the classical period, that's when most religious movements happen. Actually, I think in your beautiful key concepts, if you are open to 2.2, just flip your paper over to 2.1, you'll see all those religious symbols. So this is whatever most big religious movements happen. So that's not the late 1400s. So in the rise of the Aztec and Inca empires, that's just testing, did you know when that happened? Like, did you think they only existed whenever Christopher Columbus came over? It was like, oh, they're in existence. That must be whenever it happened. Right, that's what it's testing you. So then you kind of are separated only into like B and C. That's the only options that you have left, right? So the economic recovery in Afro-Eurasia after the Black Death, and the incorporation of the Americas into a broader global network of exchange. So it's like, okay, which one of these two things happened? So now you got to memorize the date. When did the Black Death happen? Did you all have that memorized? Is that important to memorize? Maybe. Like, can you incorporate that into an essay? Depends on what the essays are about. So that's the kind of gamble in this test is, you've got all this content to memorize, but you also have to kind of consider where did it happen. You need to be able to take events and drag and drop them into that appropriate period, right? And so the Black Death happened around 1348. There's a really great, if anybody likes that movie Ratatouille, there's a great film short. They have extra scenes if you're interested in that. I only know that because I'm a teacher. And if you know much about that, in 1492, Columbus sailed the ocean blue, right? So, and the Columbian Exchange. And then all of a sudden, there's this global world. So the right answer to this question is C. So that's that 1492 connection, Columbian Exchange. So these types of questions maybe say, okay, maybe it's important for you to memorize something. So there are some ways that you can take apart, and there are lots of lists out there. This is just a list that is compiled of like periods 1 and 2, dates that are really important. So of the poster paper that you have in front of your poster deals, all I did was I just took all of the information that was in those posters and I just compiled a list of dates that was important, right? And so I'm like, okay, this is doable for me to memorize, right? A couple of things. It's not a huge list. So the question is that something that you want to focus on? Is periodization really going to help you? If it's just that many questions, I think no matter what, if you are able to drag and drop events onto a timeline, it's going to help you in some way. So there is a little bit of kind of that memory portion too, is the timeline part. Okay, and then we're going to go on to the last type of question that I'm going to show you today, which is the continuity and change over time, and it's about the same concept that I just asked you about, which is the Columbian Exchange. So this is number 12. Okay, so on a question like this, part of the strategy is just looking for immediately moving on to a question, part of the question that you already know is incorrect. So sometimes whenever the right answer choice is A, we still find ourselves going on to B, C, and D to double check ourselves, right? And so we want to kind of minimize that as much as possible. And the only way you can minimize that is to have full confidence in your content knowledge, right? So, and you don't have to read the full parts of these questions because there will be many questions that have a long part. So you're just, if it's 2 parts, if it's got these semicolons here, then you just look at the first part and start to eliminate answers. So whenever it says the Western Hemisphere technology to Africa for part B, you're like, okay, kind of, okay. And then we've got African food to Europe, like, what? Right, so that should kind of be your turnoff. European food to the Western Hemisphere, you're like, okay, yes. Western Hemisphere diseases to Europe, yes. African population to Europe, oh yes, like that happened, that was a big deal. Triangle trade, right? Or this one, European technology to Africa. And you'll notice that they kind of play with that here. Western Hemisphere population to Africa, you're like, no, right? Not really. So then you move on, African population to the Western Hemisphere, which you're like, okay, Western Hemisphere food to Europe and Africa. You're like, kind of. African and European diseases to the Western Hemisphere. You're like, oh, kind of that too. Did you see where it's like, A, D, where do I go? So that's where you have to actually memorize. Thank you. All of them. Oh, yes, thank you. So whenever you're looking at questions like this, it's kind of important that you know the wealth of information so you can kind of separate and pull out information that you don't need. Okay, so now I'm going to talk to you about one other portion, like one other strategy portion of your multiple choice and memorizing and, you know, getting yourself ready for the content portion of this exam. So whenever we look at our multiple choice section, and I don't know if you already had noted this in your classes or not, so I'm just going to kind of reiterate that, if so. This test, multiple choice, like tries to make you cry. Like it's an attempt to see how soon until you buckled, right? So it's like, let's just see how far we can push somebody, right? Because we don't want anybody to get a 36 on the ACT. We don't want to get, you know, a perfect score on the multiple choice section. So we've got to really like smoke screen people. How are we going to do that? And so what they decided to do is they're going to cycle the periods of time. So that you can use this to your advantage. If you come across a question where you're like, I don't have a freaking clue, move on to the next question. And if you get all the way to the end of the test, you might have come across some other question that's going to help you answer that question, right? So it's going to go like period 1, period 2, 3, and if you're like, okay, period 6 is my weak part. Every time you get to a question for period 6, just skip it and move on. The middle of the test is going to be your bulk of the reading. So bulk of the reading, if we look at it holistically. So you want to try to get to the middle as quickly as possible, because that's where you're going to have to spend the most period of time. So that when you get to the end of the test, that you can still have enough time to finish. So let's look at it holistically. So just looking at the periods of time, we're not trying to find any answers. So we're looking at the screen. Question number 1 is period 1. We move up to by 1200. We've got religions, which is period 2. This is like kind of spanning a couple periods. We move on to 500 to 1,000. We move on to, that's kind of the first reading that you see. Again, we're still going here. We're still in that early period. We're starting to get a little further out. You're starting to incorporate some images and some charts. Okay. Now, some more maps. Okay. Over in here. Okay. Now, this is where we're starting to see a lot of visuals and reading. So around question 25 or 30 is where you're going to see that stuff. And you'll see it's cycled back to the Roman aqueducts. Do you see that there? Okay, so they're going to fill your page up to visually mess with you when it gets to the middle. So did you see earlier in the test where there was just one visual and one question? When you get to the middle, they are not playing around. There are 6 questions on this thing, and 2 of them are these long readings. And then 2 of them are these long kind of questions. So you have to get yourself to a place where you know that that's coming so that you can be like, ha-ha, I already knew you were going to bring this, and I'm going to bring it too. Like, I got this, right? So whenever you look at this, you are visually ready. So CDC, we're going to do it for 2 pages in a row. And that's going to be when you want to kill yourself. Really. Like, you're going to be like, the lady told me, question 41. That's where I'm at. And I literally want to murder someone. Okay? And then they're going to give you a nice little break. I'm like, oh, here's 47. Here's a map or a chart. Let's just chill out for a minute. And then they'll be like, and now back into murder. Right? Okay, so do you see where we're talking about? And then they're like, oh, wait, let's just add another thing into another chart. Let's just give them one more thing. And then the rest of the test isn't going to be as bad. But that doesn't mean you need to give up at this point, right? So this is our ending. And then that last thing, almost. We're like, let's just see who's still paying attention. Here are 4 readings. And let's just see what you can do with this, right? Okay, and that's what I'm talking about whenever I say a marathon, right? So you got to be ready for this so that whenever you see it, it doesn't surprise you. It's just going to make you smile. So you're in the test and you're like, that's funny. And then you're going to be like, well, you won, AP test person. You won on that one. 68, 69, 70, I have no idea. CCC. Like, literally no idea. But you're going to be surprised because questions 30 through 40, I'm going to dominate. Okay, so do you feel ready? Ready to study? Right. You know the strategies you need to take. Okay, so we got about a minute. You need to decide which person are you. Are you the long planner? Are you the short planner? How are you going to be ready for this? You know how to do it. All right, good luck to you. I release you.
Copy of the chart thing. Thank you so much.
Yeah, we won't want to
No, it's okay. Because everybody was done. I just promised it after everybody was done. Well, I'm happy to report.
Yeah, thank you so much for being willing to do it. All right.